Hello everyone, my name is Benny Enriquez, and I will be giving a presentation regarding areas of assessment and testing. While this entire topic could be an entire semester's worth of class material, I will do my best to give a proper overview of this field, along with training needed for competence in this area, and how this topic assists in the development of a counselor's professional identity. A psychological test is essentially an objective and standardized measure of behavior. Test results are reported as test scores, and these are statistics that have meaning in relation to a person. These scores are a reflection of a particular behavior at a moment in time, and in counseling, these scores can have a high level of importance by providing information that might not be obtained any other way. Testing the sum is an indispensable part of the evaluation process. For a counselor to properly interpret and use test scores, a counselor has to understand standardization samples, reliability and validity, comparable test, scoring procedures, method of administration, limitations, and strengths of the test being employed on a client. Psychometrists are those that specialize in this field. The majority of counselors, though, do not specialize in this field, but usually use particular tests in whichever subfield they find themselves in. Whether education, career planning, or any other myriad of the options available, those that develop these test users are called test developers. Those being tested are test takers, and those that use the results of the test are called the test users. Tests can be given singularly or given as a part of a group of tests, commonly called a test battery. Opponents of tests generally object to them for the following reasons. They believe testing encourages client dependency on both the part of the counselor and an external source of information for problem resolution, that test data prejudices a counselor's understanding of an individual, possibly even confines them to a number or a box, that test data is invalid and unreliable in that the original intent of the scale was developed using a different subset of people or group of people. This leads into cultural bias and discrimination. It is believed by some that over-reliance on test results, especially in isolation from other information about an individual, can lead to serious misuses of a test in regards to holistically understanding a client's needs. Due to this issue, there have been developments called the Standards for Multicultural Assessment. There are also ethical guidelines in place contained in the American Counseling Association's Code of Ethics. This is found in Section E, called Evaluation, Assessment, and Interpretation. It includes everything from multicultural and diversity issues, Section E8, cultural sensitivity, Section E5B, and appropriateness of instruments, Section E6A. Favorable outlooks on assessments attest that the primary function of tests is to help clients make better decisions about their future. It is said it can help clients gain self-understanding that may not be available through introspection and therapy. It can help counselors decide if the client's needs are within the range of expertise. It can help counselors better understand clients in ways not available through traditional means. It can also help counselors determine which counseling methods might be appropriately employed, and that it can help counselors predict the future performance of clients in select areas such as graduate school, the armed forces, or other areas of life. It can even be used to gauge progress or lack thereof in regards to a client and their issues. Qualities of a good test. Validity is in reference to the quality of a test. In other words, it is the degree to which a test measures what it is supposed to measure, and consequently permits appropriate interpretation of scores for proper usage. The validity of a test is determined by comparing its results with measures of a separate and independent criterion. If scores on a testing instrument correlate highly and positively with independent measures of success, then the instrument is said to possess a high degree of validity. Content validity is an indication of the degree to which a test appears to measure and what it is supposed to measure. Construct validity is what the rest is really measuring, the degree to which a test is measuring a hypothetical construct. Say, for example, anxiety or depression. Criterion validity is the comparison of test scores to a person's actual performance. Consequential validity are the social implications or consequences of test use and interpretation. Reliability is different from validity. Reliability is how consistent these scores will be. Something can be reliably wrong and still be considered reliable. Say, for example, a scale that has not been properly calibrated. Though obviously we're looking for a scale that is measuring our intended construct in a valid way. Reliability is a measure of the degree to which a test produces consistency of test scores when people are retested with the same or an equivalent instrument. There are three ways to determine reliability. Test-retest is when the same test is given again after a period of time to the same client. Parallel form is when two equivalent forms of the same test are administered. Internal consistency analysis is when the scores of two arbitrarily selected halves of a test are compared. Counselor assessment and testing. So counselors test everything from intelligence and aptitude to interest in careers to personality and achievement. In regard to training needed for competence, there is specialized training when it comes to being able to give assessments within this field. There are limitations when it comes to projective tests, though, such as in personality. For example, Rorschach testing is not something counselors are able to do, but a psychologist would be able to do. Can licensed mental health counselors administer and interpret psychological tests? As mentioned before, yes, they can, and let me go over in greater detail regarding that. The National Board of Forensic Evaluators, NBFE, adopts the position that appropriately trained licensed mental health counselors may administer and interpret psychological tests. A viewpoint consistent with various state licensure boards, including Florida, the state in which NBFE is headquartered in, which declares that licensed mental health counselors, clinical social workers, and marriage and family therapists may administer and interpret such tests as long as they have received the appropriate training and thus are qualified to perform such procedures. The NBFE supports the efforts of organizations such as the National Fair Access Coalition on testing that advocate for the protection and support of public access to professionals and organizations who have demonstrated competence in the administration and interpretation of assessment instruments, including psychological tests. This position is based on four premises: that counselors have always been experts in testing, that testing is within the scope of practice of counselors, that counselors meet the standards of test manufacturers, and that it is impractical and unethical to prohibit counselors from administering and interpreting tests. Intelligence and aptitude. Intelligence and aptitude tests are among the most controversial of testings. Commonly accused of racial and ethnic bias, its roots started in Ellis Island when people who migrated to this country were given tests regardless of the language they spoke or literacy abilities. Due to this issue, many who did not speak the language, who were illiterate, were deemed invalids. Although we have improved in creating more universal tests over the decades, there are still some kinks that could be potentially worked out in the future. Though for now, we work with what we have, and we have quite a bit more tests than what we had in the past. Intelligence can be defined in many ways. Our current understanding of intelligence is that it is multifaceted and can be looked at in terms of athletic intelligence, musical intelligence, spatial intelligence, emotional intelligence, and many other manifestations of intelligence that really boil down to how well someone can adapt quickly to different situations. Aptitude, on the other hand, is used to gauge potential in a variety of different ways. Although there is some crossover when it comes to these two concepts, they're usually tested independently from one another or given as a battery of tests together depending on the circumstance of the client and reasons for testing. The Stanford-Binet intelligence test has its roots in the early 1900s, first revised in 1916 all the way to its fifth revision in 2003. It has shifted to be more appropriate for adults and for those who are less verbally fluent. The Wechsler Preschool and Primary School of Intelligence 3 is designed for children aged 2 to 7 years of age. The Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, 4th edition, is used for children aged 6 to 16 years of age. The Adult Intelligence Scale, 4th edition, is designed for ages 16 to 89 years of age. The Wechsler Intelligence tests provide a verbal IQ, performance IQ, and full-scale IQ scores. Extensive research has been done on the Wechsler scales, and they are often the instruments of choice in the evaluation of intelligence. The alpha-beta intelligence tests were first developed during World War I, and it is best known as a forerunner of group intelligence instruments. Aptitude tests are similar in many ways to intelligence tests, but they are designed to tap a narrower range of ability. An aptitude is a capability for a task or type of skill. An aptitude test measures a person's ability to profit from further training or experience in an occupation or skill. They are usually divided into two categories: multi-aptitude batteries and component ability batteries. Respectively, one measuring a variety of potentials and component ability measuring just one single ability or skill. Some of the best known batteries include, can't see that part of my slide, I apologize about that. Moving on to interest and career. Although there is an expected relationship between ability and interest in exercising that ability, tests that best measure interests are those designed specifically for that purpose. An interest inventory is a test or checklist that assesses a person's preferences for activities and topics. Responses derived from such tests are compared with the scores of others at either a similar developmental level or with people already working in a particular area. This area of assessment usually is found within fields such as educational and career counseling. The strong interest inventory encompasses more than 200 occupational skills that indicate the similarity between the respondents' interests to those of satisfied workers in each of these occupations. They result in three forms: general occupational themes, basic interest skills, and occupational skills. The strong interest inventory is linked to the John Holland theory of career development. John Holland's theory of career development proposes that there are 6 major types of people and environments: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. The closer the relationship between people and environment types, the more satisfying the relationship. Personality. Personality can be defined in many ways. what is normal in one culture may not be considered normal in another culture. At the root of it all, most personality tests focus on personality theories that involve biological, social, and environmental aspects of human beings. A personality test may be defined as any of several methods of analyzing personality. These include things such as checklists, personality inventories, and projective techniques. These tests can be divided into two main categories: objective and projective. The most known objective test, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory version 2, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, and the Edward Personal Preference Schedule. These tests yield scores that are independent of any opinion or judgment of the scorer, as are all objective tests. When it comes to projective tests, these are subjective views of the test user. One difference when it comes to who is and who isn't able to perform these tests in the field of mental health is that counselors are not able to perform projective or subjective testing. Psychologists are. These tests seldomly or have a minimal number of words, thereby decreasing the chance for cultural bias. One famous example of such testing is the Rorschach inkblot test. Here is a slide showing some of the most commonly used images within the test. The Rorschach test, also known as the Rorschach inkblot test or Rorschach technique, or simply the inkblot test, is a psychological test in which a subject's perception of ink blots are recorded and then analyzed using psychological interpretation, complex algorithms, or both. It consists of a series of 10 blots which are presented to an individual one at a time. Test takers are asked what they see in these ink blots, and their answers are recorded. These answers are then evaluated and interpreted to diagnose psychotic versus non-psychotic thoughts and general themes. Some psychologists use this test to examine a person's personality characteristics and emotional functioning. It has been employed to detect underlying thought disorder, especially in cases where patients are reluctant to describe their thinking processes openly. This test is named after its creator, Swiss psychologist Hermann Rorschach. In the 1960s, this test was the most widely used projective test. In a national survey in the U.S., this test ranked 8th among psychological tests used in outpatient mental health facilities. It is the second most widely used test by the members of the Society for Personality Assessment, and it is requested by psychiatrists in 25% of forensic assessment cases. Usually, it is given in a battery of tests that often include the MMPI and the MCI-3. In surveys, the use of Rorschach ranges from a low 20% by correctional psychiatrists to a high 80% by clinical psychologists engaged in assessment services. The 80% of psychology graduate programs surveyed teach it. Although the Exner scoring system developed in the 1960s claims to have addressed and often refuted many criticisms of the original testing system with an extensive body of research, some researchers continue to raise questions. The areas of dispute include the objectivity of testers, inter-rater reliability, the verifiability and general validity of the test, bias of the test's pathology skills towards greater number of responses, the limited number of psychological conditions which it can accurately diagnose, and finally, the inability to replicate the test norms. So that is the end of my presentation, and I want to thank anyone that sat through this and gave it a listen. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful